What's going on, guys? Marco here with Dynasty Nerds, and I am bringing you my 5 moves to make for Week 7. All right, so Week 6 was kind of a weird week, but I've still got moves for you to make. Some of these moves will be Dynasty, a few will be redraft, but it's basically kind of helping everyone no matter what you are playing. We would love for you to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you know when we are dropping content, because we are bringing content each and every day of the week, basically, and we have tons and tons of stuff planned, not just for the rest of the season, but even for the offseason, so make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, drop me a follow on Twitter at Marco_14P. My DMs are always open. You can tweet at me, you can message me, whatever you want to do, and I'd love to answer any start-sit questions, any trade questions, and anything like that. All right, so let's kick it off here with my first move to make, and that is if you are a rebuilding team or a contending team, here are players I am buying from the Detroit Lions. Obviously, the first one is super easy. It's DeAndre Swift. Now, of course, this is one that might cost you quite a bit. So for DeAndre Swift specifically, there are tons of different things that you could give up for this guy and still see a solid return here for your team for the short term and the long term. So drop questions below specifically with your rosters, or again, hit me on Twitter. The other 3 guys I want to talk about is Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and TJ Hockenson. Here's the reality. We know St. Brown is good. Obviously, a lot of it has been very volume dependent, but he's been pretty efficient as well. So St. Brown is one of those guys who's a young wide receiver. He's going to retain value. This team, and this applies to Jameson Williams as well, but this team has basically got everything figured out on offense except for the quarterback, and then they've got a lot to do on defense. So it looks like these guys are going to be the core of their offense going forward. They've got a phenomenal offensive line, which will help whatever quarterback they do eventually bring in to replace Jared Goff. So St. Brown is a guy I would love to buy right now. Now, similar to, DeAndre Swift and a lot of these guys, there are tons and tons of different variations, different formats, different roster builds, different scoring that are going to tell you, hey, what should I be trading for these guys? So I don't want to waste a ton of time in this video driving into possible trade things. So really, if you guys want to drop questions below, I will get to everything, or hit me up on Twitter. The next guy, Jameson Williams. Now, he hasn't played a ton, so this is a redraft and dynasty thing, because in a lot of redraft leagues, Jameson Williams is available on the waivers, or maybe in the last couple weeks he's starting to get picked up, but he's probably going to be on the field week 7, maybe week 8 at the latest. And he was, for a lot of people, he wasn't mine, but for a lot of people he was, their wide receiver 1, their wide receiver 2 of this rookie class, and he is coming back. He looks like he could be someone who makes an immediate impact for this team. And then for dynasty purposes, similar to what I said with St. Brown, he is going to be one of the focal points of this offense, one of the mainstays, one of the core pieces to this offense as they continue to build for the future. It's a team that is set up for success for the long haul if they can add that quarterback. Jameson Williams is a guy who can stretch the field. He's a very good route runner. He's got speed that kills, and he's just going to be a guy that you really, really want on your team, because he complements Amon-Ra St. Brown really, really well. He complements DeAndre Swift, TJ Hockenson. He's just a perfect fit for this offense. If what we saw in college, if what we saw with his production profile, his prospect profile, does pan out, he could be a long-term dynasty asset that wins you games early and often once he gets onto the field, which, like I said, could be as early as week 7. And then TJ Hockenson, he is a guy who's been up and down, injured, not injured, but ultimately, when you look at the tight end landscape, there is not a ton of players to be excited about. TJ Hockenson, while he might not be a huge asset to you this year, he's not going to be someone who kills your roster this year. So even if you're a contender, I'm okay making a move for TJ Hockenson, because like I said with these other guys, they're going to add a quarterback likely in the near future here, if not in 2023. And that means that all of these guys are getting a bump. And if you get a young quarterback with a great offensive line, one of the players that will likely benefit from that is not just all of these ancillary or these deep ball guys, but it's the tight end especially. Tight end and DeAndre Swift, running back, tend to be the safety blanket for these guys. So if they get a young quarterback in the next year or two, I think all of these guys, especially, like I said, TJ Hockenson, Jameson Williams, those guys could be mainstays for your dynasty rosters for the future. So if you've got specific trade questions, drop them below. Hit me up on Twitter. The next move I think you need to make, move number 2, is buy Amari Cooper. Now, I talked about Amari Cooper in one of my videos last week, but he, has been really solid for fantasy rosters. He's been right in that, wide receiver 2 with upside range lately. And the reality is, you are buying Amari Cooper not for right now, unless you really, really need a wide receiver. Sure, go ahead and buy Amari Cooper. But really what I'm excited about, if you're a contender especially, obviously if you're a redraft team, you might be able to buy him for a little bit cheaper, but he's been pretty good. But if you're a rebuilding roster, you don't really want to buy him. But as a contender, Amari Cooper gets, now, no matter what you think of this quarterback as a person, he gets Deshaun Watson back week 13, most likely. Obviously, there's new questions here, but even if he doesn't get Deshaun Watson, he's brought enough value where his week 13 on schedule is actually really solid. And then if you add the it's obviously asterisk, but if he does get Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper could see enormous bumps in value, in target volume, and in scoring opportunity for your fantasy playoffs and to wrap up your season. And he could really get you into the playoffs if you're right on the fringes there, and he could get you through the playoffs and maybe get you a title. Now, I'll throw one trade that I actually recently made for Amari Cooper. I was a little bit deeper at running back, so I traded A.J. Dillon and a 2024 second, and I got Amari Cooper and a 2025 second. Now, it's one of those things that's so roster and dynasty and league and manager dependent that maybe this is an insane trade for you, but I got him in a league like that, and I'm a contender. So Amari Cooper, I don't need him every week, but come the playoffs, he could be a mainstay of my roster, of my lineup. So that is the first two moves that I think you should be making. Now, I want to remind you, click the link in the description below if you want 15% off joining the Nerd Herd. You get the Dynasty GM tool, you get access to tons of extra content, you get an extra podcast episode every week, or you can use promo code 14, the number 14P at sign out, and you'll get 15% off. Again, it's something that you will get tons of access to, a lot of Dynasty Nerds content, not just from me, but from the entire team, from Rich, Jared, Garrett, Matt, the guys on the pod, things like that. So do not miss out on that opportunity. All right, the next three moves I've got for you to wrap us up, and this one might make some of you guys pause and be like, why the heck would I want to do that? But I want to lay it out for you. So, okay. Acquire Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney in Dynasty. And if you're in a redraft league and either of these guys are on waivers, especially with bye weeks coming up, I think both of them are guys I'm fine adding if you've got the space. I'm not burning, top 3, top 4 waiver priority most likely, unless you need a quarterback. But I think both these guys have been trending in the right direction. So far, for week 6, I'm recording this on Monday, so for week 6, Justin Fields is actually QB8 on the week right now. And that is with a couple missed opportunities in the touchdown department. And he, over the last couple weeks, has been trending as the QB10 in points per game. So what we're starting to see from the Bears offense is, sure, they'd like to run. Justin Fields is getting more involved in the run, but he's also getting to throw the ball a lot more. The first 3 games of the season, he was only averaging 15 pass attempts per game. The last 3, he's been averaging over 20 pass attempts per game. He's averaging 100 more passing yards per game. His interceptions have dropped by around a full interception per game from the first 3 weeks to the last 3 weeks. So he is a guy who's trending in the right direction, and because he is doing that, Darnell Mooney is starting to see more and more volume. He's seen 5+ targets in the last 3 games. He almost got into the end zone to end the game to get the win last week for these guys, but ultimately they're 2 guys who I think in dynasty leagues you can probably get for cheap because of the slow start, because of just how atrocious this offense looks, and they could be really nice bye week fill-ins. And Justin Fields, if you are really just beat up at quarterback, say you had Tua, say you had Lance, Justin Fields is right now points per game a QB1, and that's something that you really want to capitalize because I think that trend is going to continue. All right, so my next move for you to make is sell Dalvin Cook. So here's the reality. Dalvin Cook has been fine for fantasy, but again, this is specifically for dynasty leagues and redraft leagues. You're not selling Dalvin Cook, most likely, but in dynasty leagues, I'm fine selling Dalvin Cook, even if you're a contender, as long as you're getting the right pieces back. His targets have plummeted since week 2. The first 2 weeks, he was seeing 5-6 targets. Then he's had a game with no targets. He's had a couple games with 2 targets. So ultimately, you're really nervous about the target volume for Dalvin Cook. He's only had 2 games where he's eclipsed the 100 total yards mark, and most of his points, especially this last week, have been just touchdowns. I think he's almost at 30% of his fantasy points so far have been from touchdowns, and of course that's something that Dalvin Cook does well. He gets into scoring opportunity and he capitalizes. Especially in this last week, he had a 53-yard run that ended with a touchdown, and that ended up being most of his fantasy points for the week. So right now, if you're in a dynasty league, there's some markers here that make you want to worry about what Dalvin Cook's going to do for you for the rest of this season. He's just not involved how we were hoping. Even if he is scoring those touchdowns, he's not going to kill you you most weeks, but I think you might be able to capitalize on his name premium and really what he's done so far fantasy points wise, and get someone who's a little bit better of an option, maybe at wide receiver or at running back, depending on your roster construction. Again, super roster and build dependent. Check out questions or drop your questions below. Hit me up on Twitter if you've got specific Dalvin questions. The last move I think you should be making is evaluating which Commander's running back you want for this season, and the answer is not Brian Robinson. It's still Antonio Gibson. And I know Antonio Gibson didn't get anywhere near the work Brian Robinson did, but the reality is Brian Robinson, in his first 2 games so far, he has not seen a target. He's been highly inefficient, and it's an awesome story. He's coming back from an injury that is not insignificant. I mean, he was shot. But this was kind of always who Brian Robinson was going to be. This is who he was in college for the most part, outside of, his senior season. But he was going to kind of always be an early down running back who was kind of touchdown dependent. Efficiency might go up a little bit, but this is a team that's throwing the ball typically a lot more. Obviously, last week wasn't 100% that, but the reality is Gibson's involved in the passing game. He is being talked about as someone that they need to get involved more, which is so backwards considering they've had him all season and they have saying they want to get him involved less. So it's a little bit hit or miss here, but if you're in a PPR league especially, Antonio Gibson's the Washington Commanders running back you want. The reality is you probably don't want either of them, but if you're sitting with Brian Robinson, I'm okay moving him in Dynasty leagues and go see what you can get. You're not moving him for nothing, but with 17 touches, he didn't really do that much. Sure, he fell into the end zone, and that's awesome for him and his story, but unless he's falling into the end zone, he's really not bringing a ton of value to your team. All right, guys, thank you for hanging out. If you've got questions, drop them below. Hit me up on Twitter at Marco_14P. It's been fun, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to be kind, do good. Peace.